Hi everyone, today's video is going to be all about me. So the reason why the video is going to be about me is that I just really wanted to let you into a little bit of my own personal story. I don't know if many of you know, but I wasn't actually born in, so the past few months has given me a lot of reason to and a lot of time to be able to reflect on how the hell did I come into this organisation? How did I get into a cult? So yeah, sometimes it makes me laugh that I sit down and I think to myself, wow, I was in a destructive cult. But yeah, so this is hopefully some of the answers as to why I got myself into this. So looking back on my childhood, I came from quite a dysfunctional family. My parents, they separated and divorced when I was about 11. And that's a difficult time for any child really, just coming into the teenage years. But I suppose for me it was compounded by the fact that I was an only child and my parents' separation and divorce wasn't amicable, and I was often piggy in the middle of their battles and their spiteful jibes at each other. It was quite difficult to deal with. There was one stable person in my life who was a rock for me, and it was my nan. But sadly, shortly after my parents divorced, my nan died. I was with my nan when she died, and that had a massive impact on me as well. So as a child growing up, funny enough, I always had a belief in God. None of my family were religious, but I joined the girls' brigade at probably about the age of 8, and that was quite heavily linked to the local church. And so I used to take myself off to church on a Sunday. I got quite involved in doing charitable work, so I used to go door to door, raising money for charities like homeless people or sponsor a child, things like that. And yeah, I was quite heavily involved in the church. That was only probably up until I suppose about 10 or 11, about the or maybe even a little bit earlier than that. Actually, I think when my parents split up, we moved away, and so I kind of stopped going to the girls' brigade and that. But my interest in God was quite strong, and so I requested to my parents that I was, that I would be allowed to go to a religious school for my secondary choices. And they wrote a letter requesting that I have a place at the local Catholic school. And the pastor at my church, he also wrote a letter of recommendation, because they're allowed to take in a small percentage of people that are not Catholics. I was really hoping to get kind of a religious education, which I totally didn't get. But anyway, that was my desire and my goal. Anyway, as the course of my teenage years rolled out, I lost contact with my dad. Both my parents have got problems with alcohol, and I lost contact with my dad for a number of years. We're back in touch now. We have been for quite a long time. We've got a great relationship. I love my dad dearly, and he's quite poorly at the moment. And yeah, things are good between us, which I am pleased about. With my mum, I went on to live with my mum after my parents divorced, and probably coping with her own stresses and issues. She was quite negligent of my needs, and I more or less kind of brought myself up from that time on. My mum made a lot of choices that caused me to lose a lot of respect for her as a person, and there's still issues that play a role today. And so we no longer have contact. We've not had contact for about 5 years. I'm completely fine with that, because at 44 years old, you get to a point in your life where you think, you know, you're going to choose the people that are good for you to have in your life. You don't want anyone who's going to try and manipulate you or have a negative impact. And so the people that I have around me at this time are people that I really love, and that are good for me, and hopefully I can be good for them. And so in that way, things are quite good. So just going back to my childhood, yeah, the loss of my nan, the breakup of my family, yeah, I can see why I was a good candidate for being indoctrinated into a cult. I always really wanted a happy family. I didn't really have aspirations of a career. What I wanted a husband, I wanted a home, I wanted children, I wanted to be a full-time mum. When I left school, I did go to college for a period of time. I didn't complete my course. I was doing A-levels. The reason I didn't complete my course was I was financially trying to support myself. I was living at home with my mum, but she didn't really have the funds to support me going to college, and so I was working on the weekend to try to support myself going to college during the week. And when you're only sort of 16, 17, that's quite a heavy burden to bear when you haven't got anybody that is also encouraging you to you know, carry on. So quite quickly I fizzled out of going to college and just got full-time work. At that time, one day I was at work, and a gorgeous guy comes by, shows a bit of interest in me, asks if he can take me out, and that is my now husband Nathan, who some of you will have seen on some of my videos, and some of you have met. And he was not a Jehovah's Witness at that time, but his mum was a witness, and so he had been brought up from a young age with a knowledge of the truth, and you know, going to the meetings now and again. His dad had been quite opposed, so there was quite often times when Nathan wouldn't be going to the meetings, and when we met, he was same age as me, and he was just doing his own thing, as young guys do. He didn't have any commitment to going to the Kingdom Hall. He wasn't baptized or anything, but we quite quickly got very close. I was in pretty much a rush to get out of home, and Nathan's home was kind of a bit of it was a bit of a free-for-all, even though his mum was a Jehovah's Witness, because his dad was opposed, and there was a lot of children in the home, and there wasn't really any kind of structure, and so it was quite easy for me to leave my home and just move in there, and that's what I did. Now, even though Nathan wasn't a witness, he still had a lot of the witness indoctrination from a young age, and so he was quite keen on getting married, and he often spoke about going back to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, although he wasn't ready at that time. I knew nothing about Jehovah's Witnesses, and when I moved into their family home, often his mum would try to witness to me, and he also had a friend who was a baptized brother who used to come around and try and witness to me and offered me a Bible study. At the time I wasn't working, so yeah, it's about a week after we got married that I started my study, and quite quickly I went to my first meeting. Now, what I remember about the meeting was obviously the love bombing. Who don't love the love bombing? You know, you feel like a superstar, don't you? Everybody's flocking around you. Everyone wants to get to know you. Everyone wants to do stuff with you. They all think you're great, you know, for that short period of time. And obviously that I can see that draws a lot of people. But what really drew me was all these. It was a very multiracial congregation, and what I noticed was all the family units. So there were what seemed to be very happy families. Obviously, you never see what goes on behind closed doors, and a lot of that I did come to see later on. But at that initial time, yeah, I saw all these really happy families. I saw couples that had been married for donkey's years and their children and grandchildren, and they were all witnesses, and it just looked, you know, it just looked like these Bible teachings had this great effect on all these people's lives, and that really drew me. And they had publications like The Secret to Family Happiness, things like that. So I very quickly latched onto that. Now, it had quite a downside, because for me as a person, if I think that something is right or the best thing to do, I will just do it, and I won't really give it too much thought. So I threw myself into my studies, I threw myself into attending the meetings, and I also lost a lot of respect for my husband, who, for me, I thought to myself, you say you believe this is the truth, but you're not doing it. You're like, where you at, kind of thing. So that kind of put a strain on our marriage early on in those, you know, in those early years. And I would say throughout our whole marriage, Watchtower has put quite a strain on, because it asks a lot of you and a lot of your time and your energy, which really you should be giving to your partner or your family, or even your work. So yeah, I've got lots of stories about different things that happened over the years, but just this initial time, this was how I became, you know, part of the organisation. Eventually Nathan started to have a study again, and we progressed to the point of baptism shortly after the birth of our first son. And yeah, that's how I came to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Yeah, they've got lots more stories to tell, but that's the early days for us. A little bit of background for you all from me. So I'm hoping to do another video with Nathan so that he can fill you in. Obviously, how our stories come together, and he can fill you in a little bit more on things from his perspective, because we don't always view things in exactly the same way. And but needless to say, I am so happy that, you know, we came into this together and we've come out of it together. You know, I'm probably, you know, more in love with my husband now, after 25 years of marriage, than I ever have been. And yeah, I feel like life is good, and I'm looking forward to the future. Obviously, Watchtower has caused quite a number of problems, and there's a few repercussions, but overall, you know, I'm in a really good place. So that's a little bit of my background, explaining, you know, how on earth I got to be in a destructive cult. So I just thought I'd share that with you guys. Anyway, love to everybody, and hopefully I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.